Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff live here on Giants.com, YouTube, as well as the mobile app. He's Matt Citak. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. Multiple ways you can interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You can also interact with us on Twitter, hashtag Giants Chat. He is at Matt Citak, one word. I'm at Lance Medow, one word, last name Medow. Today's episode, as always, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. And we are broadcasting for the Giants Podcast Studio. It is presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. So we'll give you some takeaways from Sunday's loss in Philadelphia as the Giants and the Eagles split their season series, with Philly taking that 38-20, as well as going over some news and notes, at least, that came out of Brian Daboll's press conference. He did briefly speak with the media. Nothing necessarily stunning coming from that, but he did reflect on Cam Skattebo's injury, which obviously is one of the biggest pieces of news, as he's now going to be out for the season after undergoing surgery on his dislocated ankle. But, Matt, I want to start with the game in terms of what transpired, and I think if there is one number of all that jumps off the page for not very good reason, and this has been a bit of an Achilles heel for the Giants defense, has been the inability to stop the run. And you look at what Philadelphia put up: 276 rushing yards. They had a pair of 100-yard rushers. I mean, Tank Bigsby came in for Saquon Barkley and did not miss a beat. And I would say, if you want to pinpoint one play in particular that spells out where the issues are, and a lot of people would say the Barkley first run right out of the gates for the touchdown, that's great. And then the 28-yard run that he had before he looked to maybe pull a hamstring or have a groin injury. But to me, it was the 2nd and 31 when Bigsby comes in. They had sacked Hurts. He lost 21 yards on the previous play. And then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, they get out of that. And the rest is history. A few plays later, Dallas Goedert reaches the end zone. And the way that I looked at it is, you know, a lot of people are talking about Dexter Lawrence and how his maybe numbers are not necessarily coming to the forefront as they were in previous seasons, at least from a sack perspective. But what I think Philadelphia did a really good job is they weren't running a lot up the gut. They were running to the edges on the outside, and that to me is the most problematic area right now in the Giants' run defense. And we talk about this not just with respect to the Giants, but under the label of all other really good pass rushers. You've got to be able to set the edge as a great pass rusher in stopping the run as much as you are in pursuing the quarterback. And that, to me, is the biggest area that the Giants have to shore up here moving forward, because you can say all you want about the Niners, and they have their fair share of issues with injuries, but they still have Christian McCaffrey front and center, who's more than crafty in terms of setting the stage and the tone on the ground.
Yeah, I actually spoke about this on Friday's show, because going into Sunday's game, the Giants had allowed a success rate to opponents running to the outside. I believe it was something like 56%.
Not surprised to hear that.
I don't remember if that's the exact number, but it was a very high number, so high that it was the highest success rate of any team in at least the last decade. And that was before the Eagles did what they just did. Now, Saquon's run technically was not outside the tackles. There was a massive gaping hole that he ran through that I think you or I could have honestly gotten through. I don't know if he would have taken it to the house, but on run, you're exactly right. On runs to the outside, I looked this up. Both Saquon and Tank Bigsby averaged something like over 8 or 9 yards per carry on runs to the outside. Now, the run defense just could not stop anyone. I mean, even taking out Saquon's massive run, he still averaged something like 7 yards a carry on the other carries. You mentioned Tank Bigsby, 9 carries, 104 yards. I mean, that 2nd and 31 play, I mean, I think you nailed it. I mean, I saw the stat, I believe it was yesterday, that said the Giants have gotten opponents to a either first or second down and 11 or more yards 35 times. So that's either a penalty on first down or some sort of negative play on first down. 35 times the opponent has gotten a first down on 25 of them still. You know, you always talk about how negative plays typically leads to drive stalling for offenses. That's not really been the case for
they've overcome
for teams playing
opponents.
The Giants, because they just simply they cannot stop the run right now. And this was after a 2-week period where it looked like the run defense was starting to, pick up the slack. The first 4 weeks of the season, it was not good. Then you have the Saints and the first Eagles game where they did a pretty good job limiting both of those teams. I mean, Saquon still averaged, over 5 yards a carry, but he only got 12 carries. there was no other running back that really made a difference in that game. But then the last 2 weeks, the Broncos had 142 yards on the ground. Now, a good chunk of that was Bo Nix, but
still, that counts, though. You got to account for. Look, teams have to account for Jackson Dart. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'll throw that in. To me, it's not worth separating.
Yeah, no, for sure. But my point was just being J.K. Dobbins still enjoyed plenty of success in that game as well. Yep. He averaged a crazy high yards per carry in that game. And then obviously this past Sunday, Saquon taking Bigsby. I mean, I guess you could say that they didn't let Jalen Hurts run all over them, but that's just because Hurts did not have to.
He didn't need to,
because Saquon was getting it done. Even Tank Bigsby was getting it done. And Jalen Hurts was doing basically whatever he wanted in the air. I mean, this is probably the best 2-game stretch of Jalen Hurts' NFL career. 75% completion percentage, 4 touchdowns. He only threw for 179 yards, but again, when you run for 276, you don't really need to throw the ball that much.
And even when he threw the ball, in terms of the efficiency, his guys made plays for him. Devontae Smith had 6 catches on 9 targets, and then the Jahan Dotson catch, and he only had 2 targets. I mean, that was just a great jump ball opportunity where the quarterback is putting it up there and he's expecting his guy to make a play. And that's exactly what Dotson did. He was matched up against an inexperienced cornerback, of course, in Corey Black, and he outjumped him, Randy Mossed him, if you want to put it, and the rest obviously ended up in the end zone in terms of him finishing the play. And then Dallas Goedert, who is not the new kid on the block. I mean, we know what Goedert can do, but the difference between, if you want to just look at it from a passing perspective, Matt, take the running game out of it, what we just analyzed. If you want to hold up what the Giants did through the air versus the Eagles, Philadelphia playmakers delivered, came through. I hate to use the line, but above the X's and O's types of plays. The Giants had some opportunities, and I'm not saying that if these plays would have been made, it's going to change the trajectory or the outcome of this game. That's going down a hypothetical road, which there's no proof. But you had an opportunity with Theo Johnson down the field, okay, left sideline. Ball bounces off his chest. Darius Slayton had a chance to make a play. And we could pinpoint all of these opportunities, right, in a variety of other games. The difference between winning and losing football games, because there's such a fine line. I mean, look at the NFL standings. I'm not trying to get off topic here, but if you look at just the playoff race, there's not a lot of teams that you're mathematically eliminating at this stage because so many teams are bunched together. And forget what's going on in the AFC and the NFC. Between a 5-3 record and a 3-5 record, given the Commanders' setback, you're talking about that spot 7 through 13 right now. So all it takes is a win or a loss within the span of a week, and that final playoff spot completely flips upside down. The point is, all of these little things, whether you make a catch on 3rd down, whether, to your point, you put a team in a 2nd and 21 and you don't allow them to get over the hump. These are the things that the Giants are not executing well in, and that's why a lot of these close games are not going their way, or they're building leads and they're not able to maintain that. I think it's explainable, especially when you look at what some of these other teams who are ahead of them in the standings are able to do here and there, even if it may be through flashes. Yeah, and quite frankly, it's not going to get any easier this weekend with the matchup against the 49ers. Now, I know they have their own, I don't want to call it controversy, quarterback situation, we'll put it. Brock Purdy, maybe he's back, maybe he's not, maybe it's Mac Jones again, we don't know yet. Brock Purdy's certainly better than Mac Jones. I don't think it's like such a significant, the way they've been playing this year, not 100% Brock Purdy versus Mac Jones, I don't know if it's a significant difference, to be quite honest, but the 49ers playmakers are among the best in the NFL. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, we just talked about the success that Saquon and Tank Bigsby had. Now, McCaffrey has not been that efficient on the ground this year, but he heads into week 9 as, let me pull it up here, he ranks 8th in the NFL in receiving yards. Receiving yards alone as a running back. He is 2nd in yards from scrimmage behind only Jonathan Taylor, who is, quite frankly, in the MVP discussion right now with how Jonathan Taylor's been playing. He's only 7 yards behind JT, though. So McCaffrey is probably the most difficult running back in overall to defend against because of how much of a threat he is in the passing game, in addition to his rushing ability. I mean, he was held in check this past week. The week before, though, he had his best game of the season on the ground. I think he rushed for like 125 yards. So
this is going to be an incredibly tough matchup. You have George Kittle, who's back healthy now from an injury that cost him the first 6 weeks of the season, 5-6 weeks, looking like normal George Kittle. And he also has helped spring Christian McCaffrey. I mean, that performance I talked about 2 weeks ago, great on the ground, that was because George Kittle was back. And his run blocking is just invaluable to that 49ers team. The wide receivers, I don't know if Ricky Pearsall is going to be back yet. A
lot of these guys are banged up.
Yeah, they've had their fair share of injuries as well, the 49ers. So TBD on Ricky Pearsall, but Juwan Jennings looks like he's kind of back healthy. They have Kendrick Bourne, who's kind of stepped up in the absence of Pearsall and Jennings. They have playmakers, and I know the Giants secondary, we don't know yet if anyone's going to return that missed last week. By the time that game ended last week, the Giants were down not only Paulson Adebo and Javon Holland, who began the game, obviously ruled out, but they lost Cordell Flott to a concussion.
And that was friendly fire from Bobby Okereke.
Yes, and as we know, the concussion protocol is not a linear, road. It's maybe Flott is cleared, maybe he's not. We don't know yet. They lost Art Green, who, while he hasn't been a player on defense, really one of the key special teams guys, and just depth in that secondary. So we don't know yet if any of those guys are going to come back, because at least for Adebo and Holland, they did not get on the practice field at all last week. It's, if they had gotten a limited session in Friday, that would give me some optimism heading into this week that, maybe they'll be back. We'll see with the injury report tomorrow. Maybe they can get back on the field, but it's going to be very, very tough going against this talented 49ers team, especially if the Giants don't get any of those guys in the secondary back.
Well, and also, if you want to improve the run defense, it also starts with the guys on the back end who have to step up and slow down a Tank Bigsby, because if they get in prime position to make a tackle, that's the difference, Matt, between maybe limiting it to an 8 or a 9-yard run as opposed to a 20-yard run. Because if you look at the Bigsby run, and I know I'm emphasizing on one, but first of all, he had great blocking on the sides. He had, I think, Darius Cooper and Dallas Goedert sealed it off, but Darius Muasau was in a position to make a tackle, had him wrapped up, he sheds the tackle, and then once you get past the second level, now you're expecting somebody from the secondary to come in and clean it up. So those secondary players, the experienced ones, are critical in trying to do some damage control in terms of the run defensive struggles. And the Niners, who, as you pointed out, are dealing with injuries in their passing game, they don't know necessarily who they're going to turn to at quarterback. They would love to rely on McCaffrey. They'd love to have a run-heavy game plan against the Giants this week. And I'm sure Kyle Shanahan and company are saying, hey, we'll test the waters. We'll see whether or not the Giants have cleaned up their issues. If not, we're going to give McCaffrey. They have Brian Robinson Jr., who they acquired from Washington before the season. It's not as if they don't have the personnel to do that, and until the Giants prove that they can slow that down, you're not giving a team a reason to say, we're not going to run the football. And you pointed out McCaffrey as a receiver. You throw him the ball in the flat, and he gets 5 or 6 yards. That's an extension of the run game.
Yep.
There's no difference from that standpoint. So that's going to be the Niners' game plan unless the Giants can take those options away. They're not going to want, if Purdy comes back, they're not going to want him to throw 35 to 40 times.
No. And if it's Mac Jones, they're not going to want him to throw 35
Correct, because he's
times.
also taken his fair share of hits. So they're going into a game where the weakness of the opponent plays right into their hands, and now the cards are on the Giants side to see whether or not they could punch back, and that has been problematic. I want to flip the script, because here's the other thing to monitor from the Giants' offensive perspective. Matt, I thought the Eagles did a really nice job, and probably the most effective job thus far, in taking away or limiting Jackson Dart as a runner, meaning saying we're not going to allow Dart to run wild on us and get 8-10-yard runs to move the chains. Now, Dart still did a nice job extending plays. I'm not saying that he was a statue and that they kept him in the pocket, but what they basically told Dart is, you're going to have to move east to west. You're not moving north to south. That's what Philadelphia was very effective in doing. And part of that is, okay, this is the first team that saw him twice. And right, when you get a good look at a guy in person, it changes your perspective compared to you're looking at him on film. Remember, Denver did a lot of talking. Oh, he's a young quarterback, don't worry. And then you see the guy up close and personal, it changes things. So I think that was part of the reason. The other part was they only happened to have Jalen Carter back on the field, which also tends to help. But teams are going to get, I think, a better feel for Dart's strength. and his athleticism. And if they limit him as a runner, if you look at the run numbers, now also game flow impacted this, of course, right? The Giants are playing from behind. When you're playing from behind, you don't have the luxury to run the ball. But in fairness, 21 runs for 68 yards, okay? They averaged 3.2 yards per carry in this last game. It's not going to cut it. The last few games, they didn't run the ball effectively against Denver, and Denver also has a good run defense. So now Skattebo's out of the equation, and even when you had Skattebo, you weren't running the ball effectively. If Dart doesn't get those game-changing runs, now it falls more on the shoulders of him as a conventional passer, and I wonder whether or not that's sustainable if his threat as a runner is no longer something that you can rely on. That's another area, and the boring answer is, all of this revolves around the trenches. Yes, of course. I mean, that's football 101, but I think we could peel back the layers a little bit more where the athleticism of the quarterback has meant so much to this Giants offense. If he can't tap into that consistently, I just don't know how powerful this run game on an island can be, is my point.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing to watch on offense this weekend, because it's been 5 starts of Jackson Dart's career now. The first 3, he had over 50 yards rushing in all of them. Only the third quarterback in the last, I think maybe ever, or the last 25 years with I think it was Deshaun Watson and Jalen Hurts were the only other 2 that had 50 rushing yards in each of their first 3 games. But then the last 2 games, he's carried the ball 11 times for 28 yards. So clearly teams, watched the film for those first 3 weeks and made some adjustments and some strategies in order to take away that aspect of his game. Now, the first one of those 2 rough rushing games for Jackson Dart was against the Broncos, and it was flying 2 mile high, playing in Denver against that elite defense. That one I kind of chalk up to just, a great defense playing well and taking out an aspect of the opposing team's one of their strengths. The second game was this past Sunday against the Eagles, and as you mentioned, the second time the Eagles faced him. And again, 58 yards and a touchdown in the first game against the Eagles on the ground. Clearly, they went into this game with an emphasis of not allowing him to beat them on the ground. This Sunday, I want to see how Jackson Dart does against this 49ers defense, because this is a talented defense. Robert Saleh has this unit playing as if he never left San Francisco. This is maybe not quite to the level of the elite San Fran defenses we saw years ago, but let's keep in mind they lost Bosa and Fred Warner to season-ending injuries, and he still has the unit playing pretty well. But this will be a very good test for Jackson because it'll be his first time playing them. So it's not, second-time performance like this past Sunday against the Eagles. It's a good team. And especially, as you mentioned, obviously, there's no Skattebo now. And while Skattebo hasn't had, the most efficient rushing numbers, there's obviously no argument against the fact that he just provided the run game with such a big boost. I would say the whole team with such a big boost with both his play and just his personality and his fiery energy. So the Giants are going to need Jackson Dart to step up even more than he has this first month of his, starting in the NFL. And that's saying something because Jackson's played pretty well. It's not like he's been playing poorly. He's played pretty well. The team has not been losing because of his play, which you can look at some other rookie quarterbacks this year, previous years, where it was that guy kind of was shouldering the load of why his team was struggling. Jackson's not the reason. But now, after losing Skattebo, after losing Malik Neighbors, I know it's kind of an afterthought now, but the Giants are still out their top wide receiver as well. They're going to need Jackson to step up even more so. And it's not going to be easy against this 49ers defense.
Yeah, well, and that's why I think you're going to continue to learn a lot about your young quarterback as the offense evolves more towards him as a thrower, as a passer. Because if you're limited in terms of what you could do on the ground, and let's face it, Matt, I think even if you had a heart-to-heart conversation with Brian Dable, they're not going to tell Jackson, we don't want you to run, but he's taken his fair share of hits too when he has decided to take off and run. And if you're saying, well, you're down all of this weaponry, so just try to create something consistently, it's, once again, not sustainable and also dangerous to the well-being and health of your quarterback. So he's going to have to also learn that you've got to have some built-in self-discipline, because if you continue to absorb hit after hit, it may not be one game, but over the course of a season, there's going to be a lot of wear and tear. I don't think anybody on the team or the coaching staff wants to see him go through that, because you've got to think about longevity, and these hits are cumulative. I mean, once again, not to get off topic, but Andrew Luck, who had, a very promising outlook, he ultimately decided to retire because of the immense amount of sacks that he took. And Andrew Luck was a runner and was a really good athlete, by the way. And I'm not trying to say that there's parallels between the two, but the point is there's historical examples of quarterbacks that have taken so much of the burden on their own shoulders, thinking that they're going to put on the cape. And while you commend the quarterback for doing that, you got to protect them from themselves. So I think him as a more pocket passer, surveying the field, trying to take what the defense gives him, is going to be an important element for him to adopt and to monitor here moving forward for the Giants. One other thing that I want to get to, Matt, before we open up to YouTube comments as well as the phone lines, a lot has been made of the Giants-Eagles game from an officiating standpoint. And I have a big picture perspective. For those that have been watching the show, I have said this time and time again, and I'll continue to say it. I think questionable, borderline officiating, good teams overcome that, no matter how you want to spin it. And I don't buy any of the conspiracy theories that refs have it in for specific teams or go out of their way to screw things up. Was it a premature whistle on the tush push? Absolutely. It was definitely a premature whistle because Jalen Hurts was still fighting for position. However, okay, and this is not me playing devil's advocate, Matt, but this is where, I try to take the hardcore fandom perspective out of the way, okay? If you go back to, and I don't know if you remember this, in the 2011 Super Bowl run, Giants played the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship game.
Yep.
Ahmad Bradshaw had a play, okay, late in the fourth quarter, where he's fighting for positioning, okay? And he fumbles the ball, and there was a clear Niners recovery. I went back and I watched the video the other day, and I thought it was a premature whistle. The Niners thought it was a premature whistle, and the Giants got away with one, and they benefited from that. So you could go through history of Giants, Eagles, and I could throw in the 30 other teams, and you're going to find plenty of premature whistles. There was still enough time in the game to overcome that. There was also a whistle on the Jake Elliott missed field goal. I don't know if that came from the officials on the broadcast. I don't know if you picked up on that. Okay. I don't know whether somebody in the stands blew a whistle and had it with them, or it came from the officials, but Sirianni was worked up over that. The point is, you and I could sit here till we're blue in the face. We could both analyze every NFL game, and I will find borderline calls every quarter, every second, holding misses, and it's not going to change the outcome. I understand fans are going to be frustrated, and you have every right to be frustrated, but the point is, you're going down a hypothetical road where you're assuming, well, if the fumble counted and the Giants get the ball back, I don't know how the ensuing drive plays out, Matt. Do you know? I mean, in your crystal ball, we have no clue how all of these things play out. And to me, it's wasteful energy over things that are more the coulda, woulda, shoulda game. And that's just my perspective and how I see it.
So I agree with you in the first thing you said, in that good teams find a way to overcome bad calls. The Giants did not lose this game because of the officiating. It's just not true. Now, it certainly did not help all of the missed calls. And you brought up the tush-push play. My issue with that is it's not that it was an early whistle. I'm sure you've seen the replay. You can hear the whistle, and it is well after Kayvon Thibodeau already has the ball in his hands, and then they blow the whistle. That is what I think everyone has the biggest issue about. Jalen Hurts is still pushing and moving forward. If he hadn't fumbled, they would have let the play keep going until Jalen Hurts stopped moving forward. He was literally still moving forward, reaching the ball out, and he got it ripped out of his hands, and then the whistle came. I think that is what everyone's biggest issue is. The only thing else I'm going to say about that play is the one good thing about it is that play should 100% signify the death of the tush push.
I don't know about that.
That play, I think, is going to cause. It's been the biggest topic of conversation for the nearly 48 hours now. People are still talking about it, not just in Giants world, all over the country now. That people are still talking about that play and how the refs just don't seem to be able to properly officiate the tush push. Whether it's all of the false starts that we've seen in the slow motion replays throughout the season, to that, but that play on Sunday, I think, is going to be the poster child or the lead evidence in supporting the banning of the tush push after the season, and it was already kind of close last year. I think that is going to be now the death of the tush push. Thank God. I mean,
well, I wouldn't jump to the conclusion. I understand. It's certainly
I
a big
feel
talking
pretty
point.
confident that
There's
that
no doubt
will
about
be
it.
the death of the tush push because of that play. And it's just because, again, and I'm not blaming the Eagles. It's not like they did anything wrong on it, obviously, but the refs just don't seem to be able to properly officiate the play. And if there's a play that the refs cannot officiate, then that play needs to be banned because it's just not fair for either team if the refs are not going to call it properly and consistently week in and week out. The other calls, some of the other questionable calls, the Darius Slayton offensive pass interference, certainly questionable. I think it's fair to say.
I mean, there was hand fighting, and to me, it went both ways.
It was hand fighting both ways,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
The Corey Black defensive pass interference, kind of a little bit questionable as well. It could have easily been called offensive pass interference. But nonetheless, the Giants didn't lose the game because of those plays. It didn't help, and as we know, momentum swings very quickly in games. So the Eagles scored on the very next play after the botched tush push fumble. That was Saquon's touchdown catch. Could things have been different? Certainly. As you said, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know. Good football teams are able to overcome mistakes made by officials. The Giants were not able to do that this past Sunday. I think, we kind of have glossed over it a little bit, but the loss of Cam Skattebo, just you could see it on the face of basically every single player as they were panning the camera to all the players reacting to the injury. It's like someone just took the air completely out of the tires. It was deflated after that.
Well, I think in the moment, I think they were deflated. I don't know, though, Matt. By the time you got to the third or the fourth quarter, I think athletes are mentally stronger than that they're not necessarily thinking about that.
I would normally agree with you 99.9% of the time, but this 0.1%, it also happened to be the guy who is now basically served, honestly, as like the heart and soul of this team the last 6 weeks. Like the fiery spark, the Energizer Bunny. I mean, if this had been anyone else on the Giants roster, Cam Skattebo would have been the guy firing the rest of the team up, being like, let's go win this for, player X, like, let's go do it for him. And I feel like he probably would have gotten the whole locker room, like, kind of rejuvenated. The fact that it was him of all the players, the guy that has, him and Jackson have become like the face of the future of the Giants. The fact that it was him, I think, was just such a devastating blow, both on the field and off the field to this team.
Well,
it's hard to see them overcome that.
No, in the moment, your point is well taken in terms of the facial expressions. Once again, I don't know if there's a correlation in terms of them struggling in the second half, meaning the defenders not being able to stop the run.
It had no effect on the run defense.
With, saying, oh man, Cam Skattebo's
it had no effect
out of this game.
On the run defense, but losing that fiery spark plug, it certainly did not help the situation and the comeback efforts.
Without a doubt. But, listen, Tyrone Tracy had a lot of experience last season, and now he's going to get an opportunity. We'll see whether or not Turbo gets called up because, here's another lost running back. So it's not as if they don't have personnel on the practice squad, but, Skattebo's cut from a different cloth. I think we've seen that, whether it be on or off the field, his toughness. And this has become, a season full of adversity, but the NFL does not feel sorry for you. The NFL does not give you additional cap space. The NFL doesn't give you an additional draft pick. You've got to make do. This is why we talk ad nauseum about depth charts and evaluating the back end of the roster, because sooner rather than later, even when you least suspect, you're going to have to turn to guys that may have only shown some flashes in the preseason. And the Giants have been tested in this area in a lot of categories, but you're not going to get a savior off the street at this point in the season. This is why you've got to build that chemistry, and you have to build the strength of your roster, sometimes in areas that, once again, you weren't necessarily anticipating you were going to turn to. Let's open. Yeah, go ahead.
Look, it's next man up. And we said the same thing when Malik went down. You're 100% right. At this point, there's no excuses. Cam Skattebo will be missed, but it's on to week 9, and now it's next man up. And to be 100% honest, having a guy who coming off a 1,200 total yards from scrimmage rookie season as a 5th round pick in Tyrone Tracy, not the worst guy to have as your next man up. He was the starter until he got injured himself in week 3, and that paved the way for Skattebo to take over. And then obviously we saw him run over multiple guys every week, and then, he wasn't giving the backfield back to Tyrone. But Tyrone, he's no slouch. Like, he is, if you're going to have the next man up and a backup running back, he's got to be among, if we're going to call Scat as the starting running back, among the better running backs, backup running backs in the NFL. He's coming off a very strong rookie season. Everyone was so high on him after the season. He got a little overshadowed by Skattebo and just Skattebo's popularity, but he's a very good football player himself. He's no slouch. I don't know if he's not going to run guys over, obviously, like Cam Skattebo does, but he is a lot more elusive, and he could force missed tackles by, jukes and just making guys miss as opposed to running them over like we have seen Cam do over the last month. So
it's a different style.
It's a different style.
Yeah.
I don't know if the run game itself, hopefully it doesn't take much of a step back with Tyrone in. It's going to look different for sure, but he's a very capable football player that, the backfield is still in good hands with him and Motor.
Well, you look at the Giants when they had some of their wide receivers go down, they made the tweak to go heavier with tight ends. So I don't think they're going to revamp the running game. It's just going to be more of a switch to a different type of runner, but a runner that is familiar with members of the offensive line and has been the focal point. So you hope, like a little Jordan Humphrey took advantage of his opportunity in the first Philly game, that Tyrone Tracy now is amped up to be getting his starting job back and will run through it. But they're going to need that running game to manufacture something so that it could balance out what is going to have to be a little bit more of a conventional passing game with Jackson Dart. Let's head to the phone lines as we open things up and move forward here on Tuesday's edition of BBKL. It's presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. We got Scott in New Mexico with us. Scott, welcome aboard. What do you got for us?
Hi, guys. How are you doing today?
Doing all right. What's on your mind?
Good. Matt, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, and I think in a way it's sort of a myopic way of looking at that play, the tush-push, before I get to my main comments. And the reason I say that is, while that call was egregious, and I agree with you there, you're looking at it from the football perspective. The NFL, in my opinion, looks at it as an entertainment perspective. Every single game that Philadelphia plays, everybody wants to see that play. Whether people are moving before the snap or anything like that, they want to see that play. And the NFL is all about entertainment, not necessarily all about football. And so from my point of view, I'm not sure they'll ever get rid of that play. They may make some adjustments, but I just don't see that happening.
They were just a few owner votes short this past offseason from it being bad. I think it was like 3 votes short, and now all the controversy around the false starts that aren't called, this fumble,
right.
I think it certainly has momentum to be pushed out the door this offseason.
I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you, but I just don't see it, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they will get rid of it, but I just think it's more an entertainment perspective than anything else. But my main points that I wanted to talk about was really the Giants' rushing defense. Right now, they rank 30th, which is they're giving up a little less than 149 yards a game. It would surprise you to learn who's 31st in the league. I don't know if either of you know, but it's Buffalo, and they're giving up 150 yards per game. But the interesting statistic I wanted to go over with you guys was this. At home, the Giants are giving up 110 yards. On the road, they're giving up 172 yards, which is a really huge discrepancy. And last year, I think they gave up about 136 yards. So there's a vast difference, a lot of the same personnel. So I'm asking basically, what do you attribute it to? Because if they're only giving up 110 yards with the same personnel at home, why the discrepancy on the road with such a big difference? It's almost, 60 yards difference on the road? And I don't understand it's the same personnel. Yes, there are injuries. But it seems to me a very big discrepancy. I was wondering what you might attribute it to.
Well, I haven't noticed the disparity. I think you got to take into consideration, number one, Scott, the opponents that you play. And I'm not saying that they played teams that have struggled. Your home opponents have been the Chiefs, the Chargers, and the Eagles. And we just saw Philadelphia, what they did. So they haven't drastically changed their personnel. I thought Omari and Hampton had a nice few runs for the Chargers in that game before he got hurt the following week. And Kansas City hasn't been a great rushing team, so maybe some mix in terms of who they've gone up against. Game flow, too, I think is another element that has contributed to the disparity. All of those games, for the most part, either the Giants were playing from ahead or they were in the mix. So you didn't necessarily have to shift gears in terms of what you were going to do heading in the game and all of a sudden do a complete 180. You look at the Saints game, for example, with the turnovers, they had to start playing from behind, and now New Orleans can run the football. So those are elements that perhaps explain some of the disparities, but no, they haven't taken one guy in particular out of the lineup. I mean, Matt and I were talking about there's been injuries to the secondary. Linebacking core, for the most part, they have had at least a few pieces that they could turn to, and we know the rotation up front. So I look at it where, if you were to tell me at a turning point of the season they lost Dexter Lawrence like they did last season, or they lost Bobby Okereke, I think it's a little bit more understandable. The fact that there isn't that one player to point to, it makes it a little bit of a head scratcher, but I think game flow and who you played is probably the biggest reason. And as far as your point about the Buffalo Bills and the Cincinnati Bengals are 32 for the audience to understand, and the Bengals defense has been a mess the last few seasons, Buffalo has been hammered by injuries on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, unlike the Giants, they have lost a lot of personnel. So while Buffalo, I guess it's surprising just based on name, which is, I think, what you were alluding to. If you then look at who's been off the field for them, it's not that shocking that the Bills have struggled immensely to stop the run.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just those three home opponents, I mean, you said that the Giants have been better at home. Kansas City just does not really run the football. Patrick Mahomes, I believe, is still their leading rusher, which you don't want 8 weeks into the season. The Eagles, while they did finish with not that many rushing yards, Saquon Barkley was averaging over 5 yards per carry in that game. They just got down big. Jalen Hurts attempted the second most passes of the season in that game. The Chargers had over 150 yards on the ground against the Giants in that game. So I don't really attribute it to a home-away split in terms of the run defense. I think, as Lance mentioned, some of it has just been game script, playing from behind or playing from, with a lead. And then it's just, honestly, I feel like when you're playing in front of your home crowd, it's a little easier to play, I guess, disciplined football. While we've seen the defense, especially on the run defense, not look so disciplined in some of these away games where the opponents are just completely gashing them on the ground. Home field advantage, obviously, it's a real thing, and it helps your defense, certainly.
Well, let me end it this way, and then I'll take your answers off the phone. Knowing what you just said, and knowing the personnel that the Giants have on the field, can Shane Bowen remedy this so that their rushing yards, so they become equidistant, whether it's at home or away? And are they going to change some kind of defensive schemes that are going to prevent this amount of yardage being gobbled up? And I know, Lance, you've always been a proponent of if you can't stop the run, you can't win. So what can they do? What do you see from the personnel that are on the field now that can sort of not necessarily eliminate the amount of yardage, but certainly get that yardage down considerably?
That's a fair question, Scott. Yeah, and appreciate the phone call. You got it. Thanks for giving us a ring. I mean, the big picture perspective that Scott mentioned, yes, I'm a big proponent of that, and the biggest reason is it's not so much during the flow of the game, it's the fact that if you can't stop the run, teams are going to be able to execute in the red zone, which is no surprise. Philly was 3 for 3 in the red zone, and you can tell me all you want, well, Hurts threw to Goddard, yeah, but when you're bringing in the opposition thinking you're going to run the football, now all of a sudden it's going to free up open space where it's tight to begin with inside the 20. So all of these little things add up, and that's why you have to be able to slow down the run game earlier before you even get into the red zone for that very reason. As far as can you change things? Absolutely. I mean, that's what coaches are paid for, to make tweaks, to move personnel around. I think it starts, Matt, and I'll go back with the point I brought up earlier in the show, in case some of our viewers are just tuning in. I think the discipline of the edge rushers is where it starts. And that to me is not Shane Bowen shifting personnel. The Brian Burnses of the world, the Kayvon Thibodeaux of the world, the Abdul Carters who have been moved around. I mean, those guys, they have to be able to set the edge en route to getting after the quarterback and slowing down those outside runs. You could put new secondary players in. You could put a new linebacker in, but if those guys don't hustle towards the line, and I'm talking about the sideline to help out the edge players, it's not really going to make much of a difference. It starts to me with the guys up front. That's where the improvement of execution is going to have to come from, and it's not going to be Shane Bowen taking somebody off the bench because your best players are already on the field in that department.
Yeah, it starts with the starters stepping up, and they would be the first ones to tell you that. I mean, they said it in the locker room after the game. They all, as a defense, need to step up. As you just said, no one that's currently on the bench or serving in a reserve role has a good argument for playing above the guy ahead of them on the depth chart.
Especially in terms of the pass rushers.
Yeah, it's especially up front, yes. I mean, even at all three levels at this point, I mean, obviously injuries have hurt the guys in the back end, but the best players are out there for, playing the most snaps. Dexter Lawrence led the defensive line in snaps this past week. The edge rushers, the big three guys, are playing the most snaps among the edge rushers. It starts with those guys just simply stepping up. Now, are there tweaks that, Shane Bowen and the whole defensive coaching staff can make in order to, aid in especially those outside runs? Yeah, you could drop a safety down into the box, put him at, outside of your edge rusher is just another body out there to try to limit those outside runs. There are little things you can do. You can't do that every play, though. It's going to start with your best players playing their best football. And we've seen it in flashes at times this season. We have not seen that on a consistent week-to-week basis from the defensive side of the ball. And this is with, Brian Burns, NFL leading 10 sacks. He'd be the first to tell you his season has not been perfect. Obviously, Dexter Lawrence, we know that we all want to see more from him than, the half sack he has through 8 games. Those guys are going to lead any defensive, transformation we see in the second half of the season. It's going to be those guys really kicking their game up to another level.
You bring up an interesting point about bringing a safety down. I think, though, from Bowen's perspective, with Javon Holland down now and a couple of other guys hurt, how creative can he get, knowing that also he needs to protect his corners?
100%.
Right? So it does limit him. Getting back to Scott's question, I don't know how much tweaking can be done in the secondary, because if you're Bowen, if you move now a safety down and Cordell Flott, if he can't play, now you're down your nickel and everything. It's like, how many games of musical chairs are you playing here? You still need guys on the back end to protect deep passes. So I don't know. Under normal circumstances, Matt, I'm with you. If he's got a fully healthy alignment and allotment of safeties, maybe he can toy with bringing a guy further down in the box. I just don't think he has the luxury to do that currently.
I was talking more rest of the season.
No, without a doubt.
Not on Sunday.
And I wasn't picking to pieces your suggestion. You got me thinking about that, and I'm saying to myself, I just don't know if he can even entertain that in his head.
You're right.
Because of
Given
what he's
all
dealing
the injuries,
with.
Yeah,
it's a wild ride. While we're on the topic, one other thing that I wanted to touch on, we'll get back to your phone calls here in a second. There's been a lot of talk, Matt, about Dexter Lawrence's production or the lack thereof. And the one thing that I wanted to bring up, and I remember even talking about this when Dexter had his breakout season, Dex was never a sack guy. And the problem is, I think in the wake of his 7.5 sack campaign in 2022, when he made the Pro Bowl, it flipped a switch in the fans' perspective that, now Dexter Lawrence is an 8 to 10 sack guy a season. And I would disagree with that sentiment. Dex is a really good defensive tackle who stops the run, who collapses the pocket. But remember, that season didn't come until his 4th year in the league. Okay, he was in the league 1920, 21. Then 2023, he played all 16 games. He only had 4.5 sacks. So I would say his numbers, Matt, went back down to where they were in the first few years of his career. Okay, he went back up to 9 in 2024 before he got hurt. And then now we're 8 games in, and he just has half a sack. The point is, Dexter Lawrence is not TJ Watt. Dexter Lawrence is not Brian Burns. He's not these guys that year in and year out, you know you could pencil them in between 8 to 10 sacks or even higher. And I think that 1 year where his numbers jumped through the ceiling, it got people thinking that he's that type of player. And I never looked at Dex as you pen him in for the 8 to 10 sack territory. And I think that's thrown off the expectations of Dexter Lawrence. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't hold him to a higher standard, but I think they're a little bit unfair because even to this day, he's not a big sack guy just because he had 1 or 2 years that may have jumped off the page.
See, there I kind of disagree with you because, the first 3 seasons of his career, he did only have, a handful of sacks each year. But that 2022 campaign is where we saw him become the Dexter Lawrence that we now know and love. Like, he is now one of the most dominant defensive tackles in the NFL based on the 2022, 2023, and 2024 campaigns where we saw his sack numbers increase. I mean, the lowest he had was 4.5 sacks in that 2023
but
season.
He had 4 in 2020, Matt, is my point. So,
but that was not before he took his game to another level.
Sure.
He's now established himself as one of the premier players at his position. You expect the numbers to increase with that, and they have for the prior to, not counting this season, the last 3 seasons, every year he had more than that 4 sacks. Of course, one of the years 4.5.
I mean, they fluctuate. But
it's
my point.
It's not it's not purely the sack numbers. If you look at his pressure numbers,
sure,
the pressure numbers are down significantly as well. He's in the last couple of years, especially last year, where he had the 9 sacks in 12 games. He had an insane number of pressures as well, and that was with facing a league-leading rate of double teams. Now, he is once again leading the league in double team rate, but the pressures just aren't there and the sacks aren't there. The production, he's had plays where he's shown flashes of that old Dexter, but on a consistent week-to-week basis, he has not looked like the same absolutely dominant player as the last 3 seasons. Now, he has somewhat opened things up for the guys on the edge, as we fully expected going into the year. We said Dexter Lawrence probably still going to get double teamed a lot, and that's going to leave Brian Burns, Kayvon, Abdul Carter in those one-on-one situations that they need to take advantage of, which they've done, I would say, at like a solid rate, not maybe quite as much as we were expecting or hoping that they would. So I'm not saying that, Dexter's having a bad year. I think because of how he's played the last 3 years, you're right. Expectations have risen for him, as they should, because he's been 3-time Pro Bowl, 2-time All-Pro second team. Everyone expects him to play at that sort of level now, and quite frankly, halfway through the season, we just haven't really seen it yet. And maybe it's because he's still coming back from last year's injury. I'm not going to try to dive into potential reasons as to why he hasn't looked like himself, but sure. I do think that him not playing to that same All-Pro level that we've seen the last 3 years, that I think has played a factor in the defensive struggles, especially against the run.
Yeah, well, because that's, to me, his MO. It always starts, regardless of his pressures and his sacks going up. As you noted, I've always looked at him as the ability to stop the run starts and really ends with Dex, because if they can get past that first level, you're in a problematic area. And I guess I was looking at it more from, with the sack numbers going up, there is this expectation that he's consistently going to get there. There are other numbers that are not the sexy numbers that are down. And I'm not saying that he's playing at the same level, but it's the sack numbers that is the easiest category for people to look up. And those, to me, are unfair expectations because, once again, they fluctuated. Even with him elevating his play overall, it's the quarterback pressures, collapsing the pocket, and stopping the run. Those are the 3 facets that I always evaluate Dexter Lawrence on. I don't evaluate Dexter Lawrence on his sack numbers because even when his play was recognized nationally, they still went up and down. So that's the lens that I'm looking at Dex compared to just the sacks on an island, is my point.
And I'm not even saying that we should expect, double-digit sacks from Dexter Lawrence on a yearly basis. Last year, he had 9, I believe it was 9 in the first 9 games of the season. He was just off.
It was a ridiculous rate.
A ridiculous rate that we knew was not sustainable, and it didn't. He tailed off at the end before a season-ending injury. But I think it's fair to say that, 6 to 8 sacks a year is like the area in which Dexter Lawrence should and could, get on a yearly basis. I don't think that's like the way he's played the last 3 years. I don't think that's such an unreasonable.
No, it's not a
number to
huge
expect.
stretch, but I mean, even that I would say is still perhaps the 8 is more on the high side to me, based on his trend and his track record.
But again,
is my point.
In the first 3 years, his high was 4 sacks, and that was again before he really elevated his game to a whole nother level. So if it was at 4, and his game is now being raised to an All-Pro level, obviously you expect somewhat of an increase from the 4. I don't think.
Well, but I mean,
I don't
5
think 8 is like that.
I mean,
I
listen.
don't think it's that crazy.
No, I mean, you and I just look at it differently, and that's fine. I mean, 8 to me for a defensive tackle in this league, 8 is pretty damn impressive.
He had 7 sacks as a true freshman at Clemson.
Well, but I mean, the college game, and
No,
I
of
mean,
course.
look at the talent that was
the
around-
next 2 years. Those numbers did drop.
And did you also look at the guys around him at Clemson? My goodness.
but look at the guys around
No,
him
I'm
right
not
now.
saying he's playing with Joe Schmo, but that at Clemson on the collegiate level is a lot different in terms of also the caliber of the offensive lineman that you're playing here in the NFL.
But the guy that he's been compared to these last couple of years the most is Chris Jones.
Well, I was going to throw out Jeffrey Simmons, too.
You look
from
at Chris
Tennessee.
Jones' numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he had
Jones
last year.
has had some ridiculous. I mean,
last year he
you
had
have his
5
sack numbers?
sacks, but
But prior to that, he's had
10.5
double
in
digit.
2023, 15.5, 9, 7.
I
But
mean, Dex is not in that territory, man.
No, not yet. Chris Jones has obviously been doing this for a decade now. Dexter Lawrence has had 3 really good years.
Well, and that's part of my
heading
point.
into this
Yeah,
season.
sure.
He needs to do it for longer to truly be on the Chris Jones level. But going into the season, that's where the expectations were. People were saying, who's the best defensive tackle in the league? Is it Dexter Lawrence or is it Chris Jones? That was the argument that people were having.
Well, I mean, I personally wasn't having that for the very reason I would not put Dex in the Chris Jones category because I don't think Dex has gone into the sack consistent production that Chris Jones has. Also, Chris moves inside and outside too in terms of how the Chiefs align him. And that to me is huge context. Dex and Jeffrey Simmons, I think, are fairer comparisons. The Tennessee defensive tackle, because I bring up his numbers, the last 3 seasons, including the current one, 5.5 sacks. And he had the pinnacle of 8.5 in 2021. But 8.5, 7.5, his numbers have gone down, actually, because you get that one great season that everybody thinks, oh, this is the expectation, and I think that's a little bit thrown off.
Well, Jeffrey Simmons has also just lost all the talent around him, where now opposing offenses can just focus purely on him and kind of forget about anyone else.
And that's fair, too, 100%. Let's head back to the lines. Marcus is in California with us here on BBKL. What's happening, Marcus?
Hey, how you guys doing?
Doing all right. What's on your mind?
Marcus?
Oh, just a lot. You guys are my only football friends, so you guys get to hear all my rants and stuff this year. And I just needed someone to cry to, is what I told the guy. But hey, Matt, did you go to Vanderbilt? I called last week, and then when I got off, you said something about Vandy.
Yes, I did go to Vanderbilt.
Dude, I worked at Vanderbilt Medical Center all during COVID at the hospital there in the middle of the campus. So
that is
it's
awesome.
Good to see Vandy doing good this year, man. I'm proud of them.
Go Doors. Anchor down.
Yeah. So I know last week, man, it is bad. It's probably the last 5 quarters of officiating has been the worst. Can't always blame the refs, but I mean, 2 of those last Denver touchdowns, there was a block in the back, and they did have, Flott in the chokehold right on the 1-yard line. So it's been bad, but you do got to rise up, like you said, above the refs.
You have to. I mean, you can't waste energy doing that. Listen, the Broncos were unhappy about the pass interference call that set up the Giants' late touchdown, right? I mean, look at what Sean Payton did. So, they're singing the same tune that you are as a Giants fan on the reverse side, and then what did they do? They drove the field and set up a game-winning field goal. So, I mean, you and I, we could all sit here, Matt, everybody, till we're blue in the face, and we could come up with this should have been called on this play, and teams find ways to overcome it.
Yeah, and I actually think that we did in the Denver game, until we didn't. I mean, I think we don't have anybody, but Jackson Dart makes the nobodies that we have, and I'm not calling them nobodies, but we know compared to the Justin Jeffersons, Jamar Chases, and, just even most teams' number 2s, he's making them better. So I do see that in Jackson Dart. last week I was like, we shouldn't trade for a wide receiver because, we should just roll with what we have. But now that Cam's out, I do feel like Dart needs help. We don't have a third-round pick. So I don't know. I'm not in favor of firing anybody. I never have been. I think Daboll's a great coach, but I don't know that if the season keeps exploding the way it feels like it is, I don't see how we don't do anything but blow the whole thing up with like maybe 11 key players and start over. But then there's no coach. Like anybody that calls and says fire all these people, there's no coach out there that has a pedigree that's going to come in and change our franchise. Like there isn't one, because if there was, they wouldn't be available. So I don't know I just really don't even know at this point. I'm baffled and almost speechless. But
all right, Marcus.
I hope we get better. There's a beat-up 49ers team that we can beat. Like, we should be able to beat people. Like, they all get paid millions of dollars. Like, just go do it, man. Go beat up on a beat-up 49ers team that's coming to us. Like, let's do it. Jackson Dart 3-0 at home. Let's do it.
All right, Marcus. Appreciate the phone call. It's an unpredictable league. Look at what the Jets did to the Cincinnati Bengals this past weekend, and we could give you 100 other examples. Every time you think you know how the script is going to play out, the NFL and its 32 teams have completely other plans. And the Niners, as Matt and I talked about, have had their fair share of issues. They had a rough game against Houston. They don't even know right now who's going to be their quarterback. They've been banged up. They've lost personnel. But Kyle Shanahan and company actually are the poster child of finding ways with your personnel to overcome that. The best example I could come up with, if you remember a few years back, the Niners came in to MetLife Stadium. They had played the Jets the previous week. They lost everybody. Bosa got hurt. Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. And they're on their third-string quarterback, and they wound up putting up a very impressive offensive performance. So Shanahan actually has been in this department where he's had a rotating group of quarterbacks, a lot of running backs go down, offensive linemen, and they find a way. And that's the nature of the beast when it comes to the NFL. As far as the caller entertaining the idea of making a trade, remember, if you're going to make a trade, and I've said this multiple times, Matt, it doesn't make sense to do that for a rental for half a season. If you're going to bring in any personnel, specifically though a wide receiver, it's got to make sense for you beyond this year. You're not just going to bring in a guy who you think may provide a spark. So I think that's important to note. And then as far as what happens after this season, and we'll have plenty of time to analyze that, they are investing in a lot of youth and draft picks. So when you have guys on rookie contracts, there's only so much turnover that you're going to be able to adopt, because you're then going to have to remove those rookie contracts and bring in veteran players who are going to cost more. So that also is not necessarily an efficient way of building a roster. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of different topics there.
A lot to digest.
I've been, steady with the whole trading assets situation for weeks now, and saying that the only way it would make sense is if it's for someone that's beyond the season. A rental doesn't make any sense, and it still holds true now, even more so now that the Giants are 2-6. The only thing I'm going to touch on that Marcus brought up is talking about this weekend, and just go out there and win with Jackson. Even with all of the injuries the Giants have had, and especially on offense, Malik and Cam Skattebo, this team has not lost faith in itself, and it is because of Jackson Dart. Were you on yesterday's media sessions, the Zooms? Greg Van Roden said this. He basically asked, does this year feel any different? You're 2-6. You guys have been here before. Why is this year any different than previous years? And he said, it is because of Jackson Dart. We know we go into every single week. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said we go into every single week knowing that we have a chance to win because we have that guy at quarterback. So that, I agree with him. I feel there's not any opponent now on the remaining schedule where I'm going in being like, the Giants have no chance of winning this game, because when you have the quarterback, when you have that figured out, everything else will fall into place. So I'm not saying they're going to win every game. They're obviously not going to win I hope they win out, but I don't expect that to happen. But Jackson keeps them competitive in just about every game, and they think that they have a chance to win every single game, and it starts with that rookie quarterback.
Let's head back to the phone line, squeeze one more in. Big Ed is in Maryland with us here on BBKL. What's happening, Big Ed?
Hey, guys. What's happening? How you guys doing?
We're doing all right.
Good.
What's on your mind?
Oh, man, quite everything. Listen, man, there is a defense to that touch push. I played defensive line. We had to play goal line defense. And let me tell you something. You have to get right there on the line, but you cannot cross that line. And you have to stay in front of them. Keep the offense in front of you so that when they come across that line, you can defend anything that goes too low or too high. And then you can penetrate that particular middle where they normally doing the closest pushing at. Because the offense be offside sometimes. And you've seen it, and I'm sure y'all seen that, right?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's defense to that touch push. Don't got nobody tell you different.
No, the Vikings, Brian Flores laid a guy down on the ground to try to see whether or not he could stop the low penetration from the Eagles' offensive line. So it's challenged everybody, but I'm with you. If there's a will, there's a way, and I would disagree with Matt from what he said earlier. I think it's close, and there's going to be more of a conversation, but I would be still surprised if they completely got rid of it.
Nah, don't get rid of it. It's part of football. That's what it's all about.
You can't run away from it.
Is
You
it,
got to
though?
embrace the challenge.
Is it football? Huh?
Yes, it is.
What else you got for us?
100% of football. You got to get down up in them knuckles, man. You got to get underneath them. That's the difference with it. Because, mind you, years ago, the tush push was used a lot. But it was just certain teams that used it because they knew they could do it and it wouldn't be an issue. While other ones, they really just, they get away from it. But that's old school football for real, because it's mainly been about being at that 1 yard line, trying to go over the goal line. That's where I've seen it be the most.
Look, we didn't have to go into a whole, another conversation about the tush push. I just don't see how you can keep a play that the officials who are supposed to obviously maintain the make sure no one has competitive advantage throughout the game. If those people that are responsible for keeping the game fair are just simply unable to officiate that specific play, I don't see how you can keep it.
Right.
That's my argument.
Yeah, okay. I ain't going to make that big deal. He okay with me, Matt, as far as I'm concerned. Now, back to this Jackson Dart thing. Now, listen. He's our QB, okay? It's a rookie year. He's going to go through the ups and downs right now. That's fine. The key to us is we just got to keep fighting. We can beat everybody. And I mean everybody on the rest of the schedule we got. We can beat every last one of them, but we can only beat them one game at a time. So it's just got to practice well every single week. We've got to practice well. And then when the bye week comes, we can really sit down and, really get a hammer out how we can finish out the season strong. Because we're not so far out of it, but we can't keep losing any more games, though. And I think that's what we'll do for now. So just practice up well this week. Everybody get ready because November football is almost here. This is your Big Ed, my Big Ed, everyone's Big Ed from Maryland.
All right, Big Ed.
Goodbye.
Yep. Sounds good, man. Appreciate the phone call.
Thank you, Big Ed.
And listen, I get the point about reevaluating things during the bye week. The problem is you got 5 games before you get to the bye week. So by the time you get to the bye week, if you don't clean up, especially the run defense, there may not be much of a conversation. And oh, by the way,
I was going to say, those 5 games.
Yeah. Well, look at the teams. Before we wrap up here, we talked about McCaffrey. Chicago, DeAndre Swift has been running the football, I think, a lot better than he was the previous season, and we know the Bears' offense is different. Josh Jacobs is one of the most efficient runners in football. We know what the Lions offer in terms of their two-headed monster, and Gibbs and Montgomery. And New England, wouldn't say they have a powerful run game, but that offense also has looked a lot different with Josh McDaniels returning as the OC and Drake May having a very strong campaign, which is not a surprise because McDaniels has a great track record. So, yeah, I get the point, and it goes back to this league is unpredictable. Can the Giants be competitive? Can they win these games? Of course they can. We can make an argument for every single one of these weeks, but this is no picnic leading into the bye, especially when it comes to the caliber of the run games, which is, once again, the big theme of the conversation Matt and I were having, that if you don't put a stop to that, really doesn't matter what else you feel good about, because that is the biggest area that has come back to bite them.
Yeah, I mean, those 5 games before the bye are against 5 teams that are all above 500. The Bears are the worst of the group at 4-3, sitting half a game out of the last wild card spot. All other 4 are currently in the playoffs. You know, Green Bay is leading the division, leading the conference. The Patriots are second in the AFC. I mean, this is going to be the whole schedule. It was tough. We spoke about it before the season, but this is going to be a very, very difficult stretch of games where we're going to find out how much fight this Giants team really has. I mean, they're so depleted right now on both sides of the ball due to injuries. Time to see what Jackson and the rest of this team is made of. Like, let's see them. Not saying you have to go 5-0. Again, that would be fantastic. But win a couple of these games. Show some fight. Go into the bye week feeling good about the direction of the team both this season and for the future. And I think that will leave at least most Giants fans somewhat happy.
By the way, another reminder, speaking of conversations, when the schedule came out, everybody looked at, New England's a winnable game in week 13. Yeah, this is why you don't look at records from a year ago or the Bears and how they have changed their outlook. It's important to wait and see how these teams align themselves during the course of the current campaign. All right, that is going to wrap things up for us here on Tuesday's edition of BBKL. It is brought to you by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. We are in the Giants podcast studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. Appreciate everybody tuning in. For Matt Citak, I'm Lance Medow. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest, and we'll speak to you on Wednesday right here on BBKL. Have a good one.